like to start with what I know and then work towards what I don't know. I wanted to take the formality of the house and the informality of the woods and kind of make the two combine. I'd like to show you how not to mulch around a tree. It's a step that I see very few landscapers doing. You want to make sure to have variation in your heights. Look at how lovely this is. We just cued the butterfly to come in. How we doing today, folks? It's a Monday morning and I spent about 75% of the weekend working around the yard, and I figure we'll just go ahead and give you guys a quick tour and kind of show you what I've been up to. I'm pretty sure I've shown you these beds before. I'm not really sure what exactly to talk about. I've got some new it's Baptisia. This is Baptisia, but it's supposed to be something that grows natively, and I think it has a yellow bloom as well. I picked this up last year. So this is going to be the first bloom I have for this Baptisia, and we'll see how it comes out. This bed is my seeding bed for my Stewardia here. So what I do is whenever I find seedlings, I will move them around and just give them room to grow. And I try not to mulch this bed very heavily, so there's always soil for the seeds to come up if they want. And then here we are along the drive. This is a Vitex Agnus castus, or a chast tree. Every year it grows to 5 to 6 feet tall, dives back to the ground. I cut it in the spring and it comes back. I don't usually buy potted plants because I know I'm not a very reliable waterer, but my wife quite often will come home with pansies as one of her favorite flowers. But you'll notice the one on the left clearly needs water, and the one on the right is fine. And if you're going to get potted plants, unless you're like really meticulous about watering, if you look above here, you can see that the one that's looking okay is out from the house, so water can drip on it, and the one step back, water can't drip on. And the difference is that big. I quite often will take these plants and move them out to the corner over here so the rain can get them. And maybe, you people are better waterers than me, but I always try to keep my potted plants when I have them, and honestly, it's just more work than I want to deal with to have to water plants all year. Especially in the summer, you have to water them like twice a day, but put them where the rain can get them. This here is our Hartlage Wine Calacanthus. And remember, we did this bed in the fall, and you see all the blooms coming on this? We'll go ahead and make a video, but I really like this. I like this shrub. I don't think this is where I would normally use this shrub. I'm pretty sure it's going to outgrow this space in like 2 years. It seems like a very aggressive grower. It seems very easy to grow, and these flowers, wait till you see them, they're absolutely gorgeous. We've got our Montauk daisies in the front here, and they all pulled through perfectly fine. And you see this nice edge, and I'm not going to talk too much about the edge till we get to the back. So here is my PG hydrangea, and it's starting to get new foliage. I didn't have time to go ahead and prune it back yet, but it's still well within reason. All these branches down here, I'll take all these branches off probably up until about 6 feet or so, and then just do a really heavy pruning on the top, and every year it comes back. I mean, this was down to, there was nothing smaller than about 1 inch in diameter and maybe 2 to 3 inches long at the end of last year, and it just grows back every year. Here we've got Fothergilla Major that's about to come into bloom, and I bought this thinking it was Fothergilla Minor, but based on the size, this is Major. And Fothergilla Minor, dwarf Fothergilla, it's one of my favorite shrubs. Fothergilla Major is pretty much a carbon copy. It just grows 6 to 8 feet tall, and really, really beautiful shrub. And I want to show you one of my popular videos is my iris. When I did that video, my iris were full of weeds, so it was my goal to get out this year and put some mulch around my iris before the weeds could get a hold. So these iris will be in bloom in another, looks like they still got another 2 or 3 weeks. But I got the mulch around them, so once they're done blooming, I won't have to go through, and hopefully I won't have to go through and weed a ton of weeds. But I also tried not to mulch super heavy. My big thing this year is to encourage people to mulch, but to not over mulch. And so yes, it's mulched, and iris really would prefer to just be growing with bare soil around them, but I don't have the time to weed all the crabgrass and find weeds in there, so I put a very light top dressing of mulch. This is a mock orange. It's an older shrub, Philadelphus. I think it's a double flowering one. Philadelphus Buckley's quill, and it looks like it's doing okay in the shade of this. What the heck was that? I should know what this tree is, but it's, why am I not remembering the name of this tree? I should remember the name of this tree, folks, and it's totally gone. I planted it, it's one of my favorite trees, and I think it's just the traffic is distracting me, but this mock orange is looking really good in the shade and the drought of that tree. And if you're wondering why there's a label on it, I will admit that, at my clients' yards, I don't leave labels because they look tacky. At my own house, if I put something new in, I'll often leave the label just so I can remember what the heck it is. This is Newport Blue Boxwood, and call it laziness or call it experimenting. I haven't pruned this shrub in probably 3 or 4 years, and I think it's beautiful. I really like the look of this, and it's staying tight. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to thin it a little bit and cut some of the long ones, but what a beautiful habit, and what a great screening shrub. Obviously it's going to take time, but if the nursery industry started growing, I mean, I planted these as like 2-gallon containers probably 12 or 14 years ago, so it takes them a while to get this big, but I just think that's a really nice look. Got my Lenten rose over here. I cleared this bed out. This is where I'd like to put a vegetable garden this year, and I put some mulch down just because I don't want the weeds to come up. But hopefully we're going to do some square foot gardening. We'll put some 4x4 or 4x6 or some kind of raised bed gardens in here. Put some trellises up that won't block the window, but maybe we can block the propane tank with some maybe some cucumbers or some green beans or something. And this is going to be my little attempt at a vegetable garden, which I don't want to put a fence around it. I think it's going to look gaudy and tacky, but I may have to. But I just want to get started and do something over here. And to make the room for that, I transplanted, this is Clethra barbervensis right over here. So I transplanted this shrub, and then I transplanted these 3 kind of sad looking poppies before we had the last rainstorm. And then check out this crabapple over here. I mean, I am not a huge fan of crab apples. I'm sure I've said it in other videos, but when they're in bloom, they're just an awesome tree. Unfortunately, once they finish blooming, they drop leaves for the rest of the season, and you're cleaning them up constantly. But this tree came with the house, and it was probably a quarter the size when we moved in, and it's just, for a week of the year, it's amazing. And this one is kind of cool, this crabapple. When the flowers are closed, they're red, and then when they open, they turn white. So if you saw this tree 4 days ago, it was all red. A couple years ago, I went out and I got some, this is Centaurea montana, mountain bluet, and this here is Stokesia laevis, Stokes aster. And I always have a hard time telling these 2 plants apart. So I was out a couple years ago, I picked them up, stuck them in the ground, and figured that it would be a good chance to kind of get a feel for the differences so I can ID them a little more quickly. It's funny because even here, like I can tell you the mountain bluet is much bigger than the Stokes aster. The mountain bluet, the big difference between Centaurea montana and Stokesia laevis is that the leaves are pubescent. There's like a fuzziness to them. Whereas the Stokes aster, they're not pubescent, but they still look so similar that I don't know if I'm ever going to be a master. I can usually see them and know it's one or the other, but then I have to think long and hard or go home and Google which one is which. And then back here, these are Baptisia. These are some Baptisia that are coming up over here. And this orange, I did a video about, can you see it? I did a video where I cut a white oak over the winter, and I cut into my wedge, so I've been picking this up. I don't want to leave these little pieces of the wedge out because I don't want the animals to eat them and get sick. We've got our meadow rue just starting to pop through. Meadow rue usually gives you some volunteers, so I tried to leave the volunteers that I could. And then this is Eupatorium. This is Joe Pye weed. Joe Pye weed emerges late and with a vengeance. So that's Joe Pye weed. And then I've got this little standard hydrangea that I pruned back. And then these maples, I just I took the weed whacker and I weed whacked an edge around them. And then I also weed whacked the plant, the weeds in there. And I'd like to just lay down just like an inch of mulch, a light top dressing of mulch, keep it a foot away, 6 inches to a foot away from the trunk of the tree, just enough so that we can screen out some of the annual weeds in there. That's where I want to talk a little bit about weeding the garden. So first off, what you're looking at for mulch, this mulch here is when I split my firewood, I noodle the firewood. I cut with the grain, and it leaves you with a lot of dust. So what I've been doing is saving, and I had a huge pile of mulch in the backyard, and I've been using that to mulch, and it's just beautiful stuff. I mean, my only complaint, I love this mulch because it's very fine, it's very light, and it doesn't seem to want to clump together and form balls. My only complaint is I wish it was a touch darker, but maybe it'll darken up with time. But it's so nice and fine, so there's not a ton of mulch. It may look like it because it's fluffy, but I did my spring mulching technique here where I went through the beds, left the mulch in the wheelbarrow, and just, shook off some from the rake. So for mulch over here, we're using the noodles from wood. Farther away from the house, not the showcase beds, I've just been using plain wood chip. I filmed a video last week where I showed you a whole bunch of chickweed over there, so all that chickweed's gone. I covered that up with mulch, and then I tried to thicken up any parts in this bed that needed more mulch. And I could have gone nuts, and my thought on mulching is really evolving the last few years, where I used to be like mulch everything, mulch it heavy, and now I kind of like the lighter mulch look because the plants just they're not swimming in it, they just seem healthier when there's lighter mulch. And I'm trying to find that happy balance between enough mulch to choke out the weeds, but not too much mulch to be too organic. So that's my talk on mulching. And there was a time, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, I thought I was gonna, mulch all my gardens. And it was probably before the economy tanked. And I went out, and it took me like 20 yards of mulch to do the yard. And unfortunately, that's a lot of money. And I was really having a hard time figuring out how I was going to do it. And I got to say, I'm really happy that, I do pay the wood fairy, is the guy that brings me my wood and my mulch. I do pay him some money for each load of mulch or each load of firewood. But I take the firewood, I burn it in the wood stove, which saves me money. And then I take the dust from cutting the firewood and I use it in the garden, which saves me a ton of money. And it's also nice that I have a pile on the property that's always ready to go. So that was just my first thing, was I really do enjoy the look of this mulch, and I I think this is the way I'm going to be going for my yard from here on out. Being careful not to be too heavy with the mulch, and I always caution people using natural mulches. You never want to leave natural mulches where there's standing water, because you've always run the risk of artillery fungus, which will just make it'll shoot these little black dots all over your house and make a mess of your house. So before you just go out and start using natural mulch all over your yard, Google artillery fungus, make sure you know all about it. The other thing I want to talk about in this video is, I had a comment over the weekend on one of my videos that said, how do you keep up with the weeds? What's your secret for keeping up with the weeds? And I have many different ways of keeping up with the weeds. So I'm going to try to tell you what I did in these two gardens to be a landscape contractor and have gardens this clean this early in the year. And the methods I'm using here, I don't often use at clients' houses. I kind of experiment here and we're moving over. So the first thing is, you see these beautifully edged beds. I have not used a shovel to edge my beds in at least 3, possibly 5 years. All I do to edge my beds is I take the weed whacker, I hold it upright, and I run it around the edge of the bed. As long as you do that at least every month, 2 months tops, you can keep up with it, and you can keep the grass from growing into the beds. You're not going to have as deep of an edge, but I think if you got that crisp line, you don't really need that deep edge as long as you have that good definition and there's no weeds in the bed. I mean, it takes a while, don't get me wrong, but I will go through, and I think, so yesterday maybe I spent an hour and a half re-edging my beds. So that's the first thing, is I do not, whenever you see videos in my yard, I do not use a shovel. This is all with the weed whacker, and if there's, like a little bit of grass on the edge of the bed, I'll move the weed whacker in, I miss some there, and get the grass, and maybe we should make a video about that at some point. But, I mean, to edge these gardens would have taken me all weekend alone. The other thing I'll do is, when I'm edging the beds with the weed whacker, if I see annual weeds, I will go ahead and use the weed whacker to whack them back. You got these little maple trees. The secret to weeds is you got to get them when they're young. Once they're established, they're just a bear to get out. So like over there where I had the chickweed, or over here with this maple tree, chickweed I usually only hit with the weed whacker if it's really young. But if it's small and it's an annual weed, I will just take the weed whacker and whack it. If the garden was full of 6, 8 inch tall perennial weeds, I couldn't use the weed whacker. But I will use the weed whacker for young weeds. The other thing I do is I always carry my soil knife when I'm working in the gardens. So if I see the dandelions or I see the chives, I definitely just go ahead and get them out. The sooner the better. Perennial stuff, or even like grass on the edge of the beds, I'll use my soil knife. And the key for all of this is you got to keep up with it. You can't weed your gardens once a year. You have to weed your gardens pretty much constantly, and the younger you can get those weeds, the better. And if I don't come back and touch these beds for another month, I'm pretty sure that they're going to be not looking as nice as they do today. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I try to, I do hand weed around the plants, or if there's a dandelion mixed in, but I try to not bend over as much as possible, because bending over just, it's fine once in a while, but you don't want to do it all the time. It takes its toll. So that's a little bit about what I do to keep the weeds down in the gardens. So like these trees here, yesterday I came out with the weed whacker and I cut a nice edge, and then I actually ran the weed whacker on the inside of the edge horizontal and kind of just grubbed out the weeds on the edge with the weed whacker, being careful not to grub out the tree roots. And then I'll go ahead and just, put a little dusting of mulch there to make that look nice. And by the time I clean up the leaves, this mulch is going to be blown out of the beds anyway. So over here, this again, I haven't used a shovel to edge the inside of this bed for years. However, in Theo's area, last week I was out and I did take a shovel and I edged out here and I actually grubbed out a whole bunch of grass because for some reason, I guess I must have spread some seed and there was just a ton of grass growing, and it was easier to just scrape it all out. And then whatever grass is left, I will then either hit with the weed whacker. I'm at the point where I know I'm never going to get all this grass out of the beds, so I get what I can, and then I either weed whack or flame the rest and just try to keep up with it. And then this is my little stepping stone path, which has got hosta. You know, I'm not a huge, I think I've talked bad about hosta in videos. It's overdone, but whenever I have a job where I'm getting rid of hosta, it comes home to this spot because I'm in, you know, I've got a maple tree right here and it's just dry shade. I'd like to get some old-fashioned bleeding hearts and mix them in with the hosta for that spring pop, and then maybe some foam flower. I mean, this is a good place to test bulletproof plants because it's shade and it's dry, and if it survives here, it'll survive anywhere. These are my wife's tulips. This is her little garden over here, her memorial garden. And unfortunately, this garden's in a tough spot because, again, we've got these big maple trees behind. So she has the tulips, and there is some forget-me-nots. I don't really see any forget-me-nots. There's one. She had some forget-me-nots in there as well. But, you know, even here, take a look at this edge. I don't think a shoveled edge would be, you know, or a hand-edged edge could be any better. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I can really smooth things out with the weed whacker, and I think that's a pretty sharp-looking edge. Maybe we'll make that the thumbnail for the video. And then over there, the shrub you're looking at with the yellow flowers, that is Carya japonica. And this is, it's a plant that is grown because it tolerates dry shade. I mean, it's pretty much bulletproof. So I put this in a long time ago, I don't know how long. What I need to do is after it finishes blooming, you just cut the whole plant back like 6 inches from the ground and it'll regrow. It's getting a little bit overgrown. But this Carya, if you've got dry shade, tough spot, try it. In the winter, all it is green stems. You know, it's one of those plants, again, it's beautiful in bloom, but then it's just kind of there. But sometimes there is better than looking at a fence and you know, a rundown shed. So that's Carya japonica. And then here we are, here's another bed. And my plans for this bed would be to mulch it, and here I would use the bigger chip because it's a big bed, and then go ahead and use, I'd like to mix some ground covers in here. I don't know if there's a correlation or not, but if you want to find a guy that cares about how he mows his lawn, look at his stripes. And if he's got nice straight stripes, you know he's a meticulous lawn mower, he's going to do a good job. I don't know how good I did here or not, but back in the day when I was mowing, you know, it was almost like you'd compare your stripes to other guys, and I think I'm within acceptable tolerances, but I know there's guys that do better than me at stripes. There's a channel called B&B Lawn Care, and I'm pretty sure if he was watching this video, he could do better than this. So I think that's it for today, folks. This is yet another one of my kind of rambling videos, but if you want to learn stuff, you got to kind of listen to me ramble because I don't really know where I'm going with things. But I know if I try to explain the methods I use or the reason I do things or show you some plants, and it seems like it's very informative, but I can't really make it entertaining. You know, all I can do is show you what I do. So thank you very much for watching, and we will see you soon. Take care.